This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so this is where we are. So we discussed very briefly on what exactly is something known as Azure DevOps organization. So we said there is something called Azure DevOps organization, which is the first thing that you actually go ahead and create when you start your journey with Azure DevOps. And inside an Azure DevOps organization is where you're going ahead and creating something called as a project. And inside project is where Azure DevOps really offers all its services like repos, like pipelines, like test plans, artifacts, and etc. And on Thursday, we were discussing what exactly is repos, and we said that repository is nothing but a place where you can, let's say, store all your files and you can maintain all these things in a centralized repository and etc. And this is what we were talking about. And we said that in order to start interacting with the repository, in order for you to start talking to a repository, like saving your file, storing, a lot of things out there, and etc. You need to talk the language of the repository. In our case, since we are using a distributed version control mechanism, we are dealing with a repository called Git. In our case, this is called a Git repository, which is nothing but a distributed version control system. So it's a Git repository, which is nothing but a distributed version control system. And we were looking at the language of Git. And the very first thing that we went ahead and did was to make sure to do a clone. Firstly, in order to interact with this repository, I said that you have this repository on the Azure cloud on something known as Azure DevOps, and we need to make a copy of this repository onto our local machine. And if I can make a copy of the remote repository, meaning this is a remote repository and this is my local repository right now, and if I am making a copy from the remote repository to the local repository, this operation is called a git clone. Now, this is the git workflow, guys, and this is a very important interview question again. Is that git clone? You're making sure to make a copy of the remote repository into your local machine by using an operation called a git clone. And once a git clone is done, in order to make your changes, you make your changes and stage your changes. After staging, you commit your changes. So you do a git commit, and after committing your changes, you'd like to push the changes back into the repository. So you'll now initiate an operation called push. This is called a git push operation, wherein you're just taking the changes from your local machine and making sure to push it back into the repository from where your changes came into place. So you're doing the operation back again. So you're pushing it into the repository back again. So this completes the cycle, or this completes the git life cycle, not completely, but this kind of gives you an overview of the git life cycle out here. So any questions here, guys? So we did a git clone, then we did a git commit, then we did a git push. So clone, stage, commit, and push. This is where we are doing. This is what we are doing right now. Any questions till here, guys? Anyone, anything till here? Anyone, any questions? Is everyone able to follow till here? Are we good till here? Am I good to move ahead? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let me go into my repository. So I have my repository on the cloud right now, and I have multiple branches out of my repository right now. So let me go and delete a couple of branches. I don't need a few branches out here. So how do I delete a branch? So I have a test branch here, and to the end of it, I have something called more options. I'll just click on more options out here, and I'll just say delete the branch. It says, do you want to permanently delete it? I'll say yes. And there's also called test branch one. I'll just delete the branch also. I'll just delete this also. And what I'll do is that I will make a latest copy of my main branch, meaning I'll create a new branch from my main branch. I'll just tell this is test branch main, and there are two fields that I'm actually looking into. One is the name of the branch that I'm creating. Two is the upstream source for the branch, meaning the origin for the branch. And in my case, the origin for the branch is nothing but the main branch out here. So these are two fields that I'm creating, and I'm saying create. This operation that I did on the cloud, meaning from one Git branch, I made sure to make a copy of another Git branch. So this is the remote repository inside which I had a branch called main. And from this branch, from a main branch, I ended up creating another branch called branch maybe, or test branch main. So this is the parent branch, or this is the upstream branch from which I created another child branch called test branch main. This operation that I did on the cloud is a git pull. This operation now on the cloud is called a git pull. Git pull is nothing but creating a branch from an existing branch, meaning you have an existing branch called the main branch, and you're creating a new branch from an existing branch, and this operation is now termed as a git pull operation. So we have a git clone, we have a git commit, we have a git push, we have a git pull, and after I pull the branch, I am going inside the main branch, and let's say I am making some changes to this particular file. Let's say I add another line called, this is a new line on the test branch. I'll say commit. So I'm doing a commit directly on the branch, and I'll say commit this out. So now I have something called, this is a new line on the test branch. And now I want to make sure that whatever changes that I have done on the test branch are reflected to the main branch also. So whatever file changes that I've done on the test branch, so test branch was was created for a purpose. I made some changes, and whatever changes that were there on the test branch, I want to make sure to take and give it to the main branch also. This operation is called a git merge. We call this operation as a git merge. How do you achieve a git merge? Is by using a concept called PR, full form, pull request. That's what you see here. If you want to merge the changes of one branch to the other, meaning I have a branch here called testing branch, or a test branch out here. I want to take all the changes from the test branch and let's say replicate them into the main branch. This process is called merge, and the merge is achieved by using something known as a pull request. How do I do it? How do I deal with it? Is that let me go inside this branch, and after as in I go inside this branch, it just gives me a message telling that you know what, you updated this test branch just now. Do you want to go ahead and give a pull request vote? I'll say great, create a pull request, and the direction of the pull request or the direction of the merge is from the test branch main, which is the child branch, meaning the changes are in this branch, into the main branch. It's saying, okay, fine, these changes are the direction of the change is from the test branch into the main branch. You're good to go ahead and create a pull request. And I can say, this is my first PR, added a new line into the README file. And then I'll go ahead and create this out. So I created something called as a pull request right now. I'll just approve my PR. There is a process of approval for the PR, meaning you're taking change from one branch, sending it into the other branch. So since I'm doing this change, I'll just go ahead and say, okay, fine, you know what, I'll just approve this change. And once approved, I can go ahead and complete the change. And usually we delete the child branch, which we no longer need. So I'm deleting the test branch after the merge is happening, and I'm saying complete the merge. So this is what I did. I started off with a git pull operation. So this is the second cycle that I'm actually talking about. I did a git pull, meaning I created a test branch or a test branch main from the main branch. I made some change in the main branch, and once the change is done, I said the change needs to be merged using a pull request. So I created a pull request, approved the PR, and deleted the test branch. This is what I did, and this is how my changes now look like. I only have one branch in my repository called a main, and in my main branch, I have a new line. And if I look at the history of the changes, this new line was added by a pull request. This new line was added by using a pull request, and this is what it tells you. And if you click on this particular pull request, it will tell you who approved this pull request, what are the file changes that were there in this pull request, and etc. So this will help you in achieving something called as a version control. So these are the terminologies what I'm kind of making kind of getting kind of helping you all to get used to. So again, clone is an operation that you do from the remote repository to your local machine. Push is the operation that you're taking changes from your local machine and pushing it to the cloud, which is called git push. Git pull is a process of creating one branch, meaning you already have one branch called a main. You want to create another branch called a test branch, probably. So this operation of creating one branch from another is called a git pull operation. Then you have something known as a process of merge or something, or the merge basically is nothing but the changes from one branch are given into the other, meaning you want to take the changes from one branch and push it to the other or throw it into the other. This operation is achieved by something called as a pull request, or in short called PR. Following this, guys, any questions till here? Anyone, anything till here? Anyone, anything till here? Are we good till here? Because the reason I'm emphasizing on this is that these are very, very much asked interview questions. That what does get clone, what does get push, and etc. And we need to know the very basics of it. So the reason being, I'm stressing on this so much. So are we good till here, guys? Any questions till here? Anyone, anything?
Hello, sir.
Mhm.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Yeah, good
Hello.
morning. Yeah, good morning. Go ahead.
ఈ గిట్ క్లోన్ గిట్ పుష్ గిట్ ఫుల్ అనేది మామూలుగా అండి మనకు ఒక రియల్ టైంలో ఒక టాస్క్ ఇచ్చినప్పుడు ఆ టాస్క్ కంప్లీట్ చేసి దాన్ని మూవ్ చేసుకోవడం చేయడం అంతేనా సార్?
See, one thing again, the course is coming almost to an end. So please ask your questions in English because when you're going in a real time environment, right, you'll actually have to talk English, right? So,
Okay. Okay.
yes, you have to do that. Uh, but there is a format in what you do it. So that's something that we'll discuss. So I'm just giving you the very basics of it. That what is the
Okay.
terminology of it, so that you will get used to it. That's it.
Okay.
Any more questions here, guys? Okay, so I'll address one question out here. Is that someone the other day asked a question that I have one branch in my repository. For example, I just have one main branch in my repository out here. This is actually sufficient. Like all my activities to store my code and etc. Main branch in my repository is actually sufficient. Then why do you even want to create so many branches out there? Like what is the idea behind creating so many branches out there? Because right now what we did is that we made sure to cover the basics on what is clone and what are the all the terminologies that we need to understand before we go ahead and start our journey with Azure DevOps. But the question here is that yes, is the main branch sufficient? More than sufficient? Yes, definitely sufficient. But why do we need so many branches out here? Like, what is the logic behind so many branches? That's where something a very important concept called branching and merging strategies come into picture. Branching and merging strategies. What exactly is this? Like, what exactly do I mean by branching and merging strategies? What is the strategy that I'm actually talking about? Is that any organization that you actually work with, or any project that you actually work in, will have a agreed upon convention that what, this is the flow of the project, or this is how the project should move. Because right now we are in an agile methodology of development. So you need to have a proper flow to everything. You need to properly define everything. So in the same way, each and every project's life cycle starts with setting up the repository, and this setting up the repository is the work, or is, let's say, one of the core jobs of a DevOps engineers. It might look kind of very easy on its face, but once we go inside it, you can understand what is the complexity that is involved in it. So setting up the repository is one of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest roles that as a DevOps engineers that we play on a daily basis, for which you need to understand what is the branching strategy that is followed by an organization. Now this is the first question that I would ask for any organization who gives me a task saying that what, create branches. Then I would go back to my project manager and tell, or ask him that what is the branching strategy that is actually followed in our project. Usually what happens is that by default any repository comes with a branch called main or a master. Any repository comes with this particular branch. Even in our case, we have a main. This was also called as a master. Like earlier, when we used to work with it, we are only calling this as a main branch since like about 6 or 7 months. But before that, this was called as a master. So main master means the same thing. Now this branch, main or the master branch, is considered in any project as a backup branch, meaning this branch should or will always hold the code that is ready, that's like production ready. This is something that we call production ready code. What do you mean by production ready code? Is that a working code, a working code which basically can help you. So this main branch or the master branch will always act as a backup branch. to hold your production ready code. So whatever code that you have as production ready, this main branch or this master branch will act as a backup to it. So the policy that I want to say here is that, or the rule that I want to place here is that no developer should do a direct commit on this branch, meaning there are no commits actually allowed on this particular branch. So there are no direct commits. So how do I tell a developer that, you know what, please don't commit on this branch? Please don't do any pull request into the branch. It is not allowed out here. This is something that I want to actually communicate to, the developers inside my organization. So I can do one thing. I can go ahead, send across an email to my entire organization telling that, you know what, this is a master branch. This is for something known as a backup policy, or for the backup purpose. So I don't want any developers to directly, go ahead and commit onto the on top of this particular branch. But still, again, developers, some of the developers might misreading that email. Some of the developers might not even look at the email and etc. Right? So they can come here, and nothing is actually stopping them to commit directly on top of it. So I can say this is second line, and I can say commit. So me as a developer, I do not know. I'm very new to the organization. I went ahead and committed this out. But the policy of my organization is that there is no direct commit on the main or the master branch. This branch is only used for a backup. It's production ready. So I now basically come to a conclusion that sending an email out is not the best strategy out here, because a lot of people are actually missing it and etc. I somehow want to set some standard onto it, telling that, you know what, I don't want you to go ahead and commit it and etc. This is where something known as branch policy comes into picture. Now, branch policy is there in place to as a restriction to control how someone commits, who commits, how do they commit, and etc. Meaning, if I now go into a branch, something known as main, and in the more options here, I have something called as a branch policy. And these are all the branch policies, or this is all something that I'm actually looking at right now, which is called require number of reviewers, check for link work items, comment resolution, limit merge types, and etc. We'll talk about each and everything, but I'll just switch this on for now. And I'll say if someone wants to commit onto the main branch, onto let's say something known as a master branch, or main or a master branch, sorry, they at least need one person apart from the author, meaning if I'm basically going ahead and making a change onto the main branch, or if I'm going ahead and making a change onto some branch and want to merge it into, let's say, the main branch, like I just did earlier, I am now called as the author of the change. Apart from me, there should at least be one person who needs to review my change. This is called require minimum number of reviewers. So at least one person who needs to review the change is what this is, right now professing, or this is what this is right now telling, which is the first, or which is the minimum branch policy that we do have. So I am now going ahead and setting something called as a branch policy on my main branch, which requires at least one reviewer to go ahead and review the change before the change is merged into the main branch. This is the first thing that I'm setting out, and this is the only thing that I'm setting out for now. And there are a lot of things that you can actually do with this. And once this is done, I'll just go back into my branches, and I have now called something called a flag called branch has policies, meaning I just put in one policy. Even one policy is good enough for this flag to come up called branch has policies. Now here's the deal. I don't send an email. I just communicate out to my developers long. I just communicated out to my developers long back that, you know what, this branch should not be touched directly. you should not go ahead and do a direct commit onto the main of the master branch. But some developer did not read the email. He wanted to go ahead and commit this out. So he's editing the file again and he says, okay, fine, adding a new line here. Just adding something and I'll say commit. And I'll say update this file and the branch name is main. I'll say commit. As and when I do it, no matter how many times I do this, I'll get this error message telling that pushes to this branch are not permitted. You must use a pull request to update this branch. The reason you're getting this message is because there are no direct commits allowed on the main branch, and I am achieving this using a simple concept called branching policy. So I'm now using a branching policy in order to protect my branch. So now the developer is left with no choice but to create a new branch, meaning pull a new branch from the main branch, make his changes, raise a
Uh,
PR.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry
please
to
go ahead.
interrupt. I have a question here. As you said that as you are the authorizer who has created the policy there, branch
Mhm.
policy, right? So you should be having the access to edit the main branch there, no? Apart from you, there's
No,
one other
no,
reviewer, and
no. So even if I go ahead and create the policy out here, like the policy is for everyone right now. So I won't be able to go ahead and let's say make any change out here. It's like I'm setting a rule and I cannot override that rule again. Myself, I cannot override that rule again. So I won't be able to do that. So the way I can do this is that I need to pull a new branch. So I need to create a new branch out here. Let's say test branch. Make changes in this branch. So main branch this cannot be touched right now because this the it has policies. You cannot touch it directly. That's where you come up with a new branch.
so yeah,
Yeah,
so
please.
as the main branch has the policies, nobody in the organization will be able to edit it or touch it or do anything. It's just for a read-only basis.
Uh, See
Am I right?
again, they can edit it. That's the reason I said there are no direct commits allowed on top of it. You can
Mm-hmm.
edit it provided you have a pull request. If you have a pull request, you can take your changes, merge it into the main branch. So this is what I'm doing right now. So if I have a pull request, meaning I'll say this is my third line, and I'll do a commit on top of the test branch, and I'm creating a pull request to the main branch. This is how I need to make sure I change something into my main branch, and I'll say create. But this time around, my branch has a policy which is now telling me that I need at least one reviewer to approve my change. And my approval is not valid here. If I do an approver, or if I basically approve this out, I am still an optional approver. My approval is still not valid. It still says that, you know what, at least one reviewer beside the author must approve this. So I am the author of this change and I cannot approve it. I need someone like a technical lead or someone to go ahead and approve this change so that the main branch can be updated. This is the terminology what I'm getting into. So the main branch can be updated. Reason being, this branch now has some policies which mandates to do so. At least one reviewer, allow requester to approve their own change. No, I'm not taking this out. Reason being, I am the requester. I shouldn't let myself to go ahead and approve this out. So that's the reason I said no direct commits to this branch, but you can update this branch with a pull request provided someone like a technical lead can approve it out. And they'll only approve it if it is needed. Meaning you now want to make sure that the backup copy is updated. Meaning there is a new code, there's new backup that is ready. You want to update it, please go ahead and do it with a PR. you cannot do a direct commit is what I kind of what I am right now professing out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. So the reviewer or the technical person, how do we inform that person that I have made so and so changes and then he has to approve it?
Okay, good question again. So you can do like something like I can take this link for the PR, and in most likely what's going to happen in a real time environment, in practicality, what's going to happen is that I'll inform that person over, let's say, any instant messaging like Teams, Skype, or something, saying that what, I actually am done with this particular pull request. Can you please review this out? The technical person will actually come here, or my lead will actually come here, who's usually my colleague, look at the file, say that okay, fine, this looks good, goes ahead and approves us out. Usually this is what happens. But a better way to do it is that if you go into the branch policies and if you just scroll down, there is something known as automatically include reviewers. So I am saying that I need at least one reviewer, and I can go ahead and include a reviewer. And let me give a email ID out here. I have another email ID called contributor. I say this is my technical lead. This is required, and I'll say save. So what happens right now is that whenever someone goes ahead and raises a pull request, and email will trigger to this particular person telling that what, you have a pull request that is ready. Can you please go ahead and approve it out? Can you please go ahead and review it out? So there's an email directly getting triggered to this particular email ID, which will help them to understand that there are pull requests that are waiting. I'll go there and approve this out. So either the instant messaging, which is normally the convention what we follow in a real-time environment, is like usually we know our technical leads. We know who's our technical lead, so we just go ahead and tell them that hey, you know what, I have given a pull request for you. Can you please go ahead and approve this out? Or in the branch policy itself, I can automatically include the reviewers, meaning whenever I now raise a pull request, this person will be automatically included as a reviewer. It says one person beside the author. This guy called contributor is now as a reviewer. See, he's automatically added as a reviewer. And if I go into this email ID, I will have an email telling me that what, you have a pull request waiting for your approval. Can you please go ahead and review it out? So now it's telling contributor must approve it. It's not at least one person. It's now specifically the contributor. So this is how you can go ahead and do it. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yes, yes. So what if the contributor moves out of the organization? So we will be able to change the contributor's name there?
Yeah, you can change that at any given point in time. As a DevOps engineer, I have this privilege to go ahead and say, hey, what, not this person, but someone else. I can just go ahead and add someone else out here. So, for example, if I add myself, and I mean, it's not going to be like really beneficial out here if I add myself, because I am basically allowing my own self to approve my change. But in an
Hmm.
organization, you won't have just two, but you'll have like a lot of people. You can just add someone else too.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
But usually, what happens is that instead of adding a person, we add a group here. Like we can go ahead and create a group in Azure DevOps. Like for example, a group called administrators, where you'll have like about 10-15 people inside that. You'll add the entire group, and you'll set a policy such a way that at least one person from that particular group should go ahead and approve it out. So in that case, even one leaves, you have like about the rest 14 who can directly go ahead and approve it out, or one of the rest 14 can directly go ahead and approve this out.
Yes, correct.
So instead of a person, you go ahead and add a group out here, a group of reviewers basically that can make sure to approve your change. Any more questions here, guys? So now I am establishing a fact that, or now I'm establishing a norm that the main branch is never used or can never be directly updated. So as a developer, now I am a bit confused because the main branch right now is just a backup branch. But I want to store my code. I not only want to store my code on the cloud. But as a DevOps practice, after storing the code, I also want to build the code, because I wrote a code in my local machine and I said there is a bit difference between writing the code and building a code. There is like a bit difference between etc. And I'm now telling that, you know what, I want to use the pipelines for build activities and all that stuff. But that's where branches actually come into the picture actually. So I as a developer is now concerned that, you know what, an Azure DevOps repository is just not used to go ahead and store the code. It is also used to, or very importantly, it's also used to go ahead and build the code. So how do I build the code? Then I now say introduce a new branch called, you know what, now I introduce a new policy called, or a new branch called a develop branch. So I create a develop branch from the main branch, like in the very beginning of my project, which is nothing but an empty shell, so that developers can use it. So this is where I introduce something known as a develop branch, which is streaming from a main branch, and I'll say create. This is the branch which should be used by the developers to go ahead and do a commit of their code, meaning for their daily developmental activities. Meaning this will be the branch, or this will be my source branch for my build and release activities. This will be the source branch for all these things out. Meaning whatever code my developer is committing onto the develop branch will be later used to build, meaning to convert the code from a high level language to a low level language, and to release the code. Two things I'm talking about out here. So build and release activities are always done from develop branch. So I use a build activity and I then use a release activity out here, and I release my code onto a cloud like Azure, in our case in Azure, and I release it into something called as an Azure environment. What do I mean by an environment is that, let's say I'm building a .NET code. I want to release it onto something called as a web application in Azure. So let me bring in the Azure web app here. So I have built my code. Instead of doing it from the Visual Studio, I'm now doing it from Azure DevOps, and I'm releasing my code onto, let's say, a web app. But the question that I need to ask myself is that, is this web app directly being used by a client? I would say not really. This is a web app which I will call as a development application, or in other words, this is called a development environment, wherein you take your code and release it onto a development environment so that you can test it, you can develop your code, and etc. So I am now testing my code directly on the cloud and not on the local machine. I am making sure to test it out on the cloud, but I am not testing it out on the production environment. There is a difference between development and the production. Production is something which the entire user is exposed to. Let's say Ola, in my case, this is the web application that is holding the code for an application, or this is the web app that is holding the code for an app called Ola. So I have Ola users are using this application out here, but I am releasing my code to this application, which is nothing but a clone, which is nothing but a copy of production, so that I can test it in a real-time scenario. I then move my code, meaning I do some test cases out here for the development team. Here is where my developers come and test it out. So the development team comes and tests this out here. So all my developers get a very good opportunity to test their code, develop their code, and etc. So this is the developers who own this environment called development, and then I promote my code, meaning after the testing is done here, I promote my code into another environment called QA, wherein the testers get an opportunity to test their code. Or the testers here, the testing team here, will now get an opportunity to test their changes, and finally, you'll have a lot of more environments like staging and so on and so forth, which I'll introduce at a later point in time. And finally, when the testers are okay with it, that's when I'll release my code to the production. This is where the direct client is affected. So the build and release activity is not a straightforward line, but it involves in a lot of testing stages from where you promote the code from one environment to the other. And a develop branch is used to carry these activities into the development environment, into the QA environment. I'm not talking about production at all. I'm not involving production till now. Development branch, the code inside the development branch is built. It is then released onto this application and then promoted to this application, but it will never go into production. Reason being, this branch is only for developmental activities. It is not for production activity. This is the other rule that I go ahead and set out at the organization level, telling that, you know what, this is this is only development. So the code from this branch, the code that got built from this branch, should only go to development and QA, but not production. I'm now setting a bridge between these two. Then how do I take the code to production? Is that's where you have another branch called a release branch, which is for one particular purpose, which is to take your code to the production environment. Because going to production is not a straightforward activity. You have a lot of tests, you have a lot of approvals in between. That is where you will create a new branch called release, which is used for one specific purpose. And you will not take your code directly to production again. You will take it to development, test it in development, do a code promotion, and then release the code into production. So now you are promoting your code from one environment to the other. You are taking the code that is built out of the release branch, taking it to the development environment, going into the QA, finally going into the production. This is how the cycle establishment is actually there. So you have to begin with something known as a main or a master branch, which is nothing but a backup for, let's say, all your developmental activities. The backup for, backup which acts as a backup for all your code that is ready to go into production. You have something called as a develop branch, which is purely intended for developmental activities, which is development QA. And then you finally have something called as a release branch, which will carry your code into production environments. These are the three main branches what we as DevOps engineers are required to establish and will be working on a daily basis. You guys getting it? Any questions till here? Anyone, anything till here? On why do you need this? What is the intent behind it and etc. Anyone, any questions that I can take till here? Is it okay? Confusing? Can I move forward? Yes, no, maybe.
We good.
Right. So this is what again I'm telling. So main branch is a branch that is just holding the code that is ready to go into production. So it's a backup branch. There are no direct commits on top of it. Reason being, it's a protected branch, it's a secure branch, so developers aren't allowed to directly commit on this. So I gave the developer something known as a develop branch, using which I will do a build and release activity, and I'll take my release activity only to the development and the QA environments. Finally, I have something known as a release branch, wherein I will now use the release branch to take the code to the development, to the QA, and then finally to the production environments. And this is the life cycle what I follow in a conventional project. Now there is one more thing to it, is that now you understand the significance of a development branch, meaning this is now the source branch for most of your developmental activities. It's going into QA, it's going into, let's say, the development, it's going into testing, etc. And I don't want developers to do a direct commit onto the develop branch either. Reason being, I want someone to check the quality of the code before the developer checks in the code from his local machine. Meaning, developer is working. I mean, there are a lot of developers who are working on the code. There are a lot of developers who are working on this particular project, and a lot of people will use this particular develop branch as their source branch to commit their code. What I am going to do here is that I'll also go ahead and establish something known as branch policies on the develop branch as well. I will now say that even the develop branch has policies, and I'm only introducing one policy for now, which is require a minimum number of reviewers. And even the develop branch cannot be committed directly. Even the code change cannot be directly committed to the develop branch, but rather the developer needs to create something known as a feature branch. Use this feature branch to make his changes, then raise a pull request into the develop branch. Feature branches are short-lived branches, meaning I have a develop branch. Now I'll say new branch out here. I'll say feature. I'm a developer. I'll say feature 100 from the develop branch, and I'll say create this out. Once I have a feature 100, I'll go inside this feature. Me as a developer is now making some code change. Example, let's say this is a feature test, and I'll say commit, and I'm committing on the feature branch and not the develop branch. Reason being, I'm not directly allowed to go ahead and commit on the develop branch because my organization wants to make sure that I have a quality code that is coming inside this branch. And now the developer will go ahead and create a pull request again, not onto the main but to the develop. And one of the, let's say, leads or one of the technical leads must go ahead and approve this change. But I as a developer, I'm not going to wait for someone to go ahead and approve this change. I'll just set it to autocomplete, and I'll say delete the branch after the merge is done. So I'm just setting it to autocomplete. Whenever, let's say, the lead comes ahead and approves this out, the merge will automatically happen. I still need an approver to approve this out. I still need someone to go ahead and approve this out. So if me as a developer will come here, approve this out, this is not valid because this is just an optional approval. This is just an optional approval. There should be someone else apart from my own self who needs to go ahead and click on this approve button, review my change, and click on this approve button. That's when my changes will go from feature into develop, and this branch will be deleted. This is a short-lived branch, meaning over a period
So,
of time, let's say, yep, someone had a question, sorry.
yeah. So if for an example in a project we have 10 developers and we are
Mhm,
creating 10 feature branches
mhm.
and then merging it, so all of the 10 changes, the feature branch changes will be updated into the develop branch.
Yes, correct. They will be updated in the develop branch if you're approving it out.
Okay. So what if both the developers do a same script, and will they be uh, overwritten or deleted or something like that?
Great question. So if let's say I am a developer who's adding a line 3 and someone else is like going ahead and deleting the line 3, this will result in something called as a merge conflict. The system will directly throw you an error telling that, what, I have a merge conflict. I cannot go ahead and carry on this change. Please resolve your merge conflict. The developers will have to resolve their merge conflicts, work with each other, resolve their merge conflicts, and then go ahead and uh, commit their changes out there. So this will not, in a normal condition, this will not result in a pull request. You will have something known as a merge conflict coming into place. So you'll have to resolve your conflicts so that your changes can be reflected into the develop branch.
Okay, so another question. Me as a developer, I have developed my code there. I have added
Okay.
lines in the feature branch, and if
Mhm.
I before sending it for approval, if I have to check whether it is working fine or no, will I be able to do that?
Yes, definitely you'll be able to do that. Do that. What normally we do is that I said that this develop branch will be used for the build and release activities, right? So what happens is that just in case if you want to check whether your feature changes are good enough, you can create a build pipeline from the feature branch directly, release it onto let's say like an environment like development, test it out on the development environment because this is something that the developer owns. This environment is something that the developer is actually responsible for. So you can take your changes from the feature, bypass the develop, directly go into the build pipeline, release it to let's say the development stage, check your changes there, and if it's working fine on the web application, you can then go ahead and give a pull request directly. So there are few organizations which will allow this process of directly going ahead and creating a build pipeline from a feature branch. So as of now, I'm just giving you a theory. I'll also show you how do you do that and what how do we normally do that and etc. Once we create a build and release pipeline for that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Any more questions here, guys? Anyone? Anything? So in this entire thing, our role as a DevOps engineer comes here in let's say the Azure repositories. Our role as a DevOps engineer, we create the main branch, apply policies on it, the develop branch apply policies on it, and when the time comes, we'll also go ahead and create something called as a release branch. I haven't created a release yet because I want to hold it. I want to explain when the release is actually created and etc. We create the release and also apply the policies on top of the release out there, and much more. Meaning in the policies we are going to do a lot of integrations and etc. which we will be looking at in the coming classes. But this is the nutshell where we work on, especially when it comes to something called as a repository. So we as DevOps engineers, we provision the repository, we create branches, we maintain, or in a nutshell, we maintain the life cycle of the entire repository, meaning the branches, the policies, the policy establishment, and etc. So in the coming classes, we will see at this entire workflow. I'm just giving an overview on what branching and merging strategy really is, what is the strategy an organization follows. So at this point, I just want to cover the theory of it so that when we do a practical, it'll become a bit easy for you all to understand what is it. So my request for you all is please look at this video once again. Please write down the points that you do not follow, because this will be a bit confusing to begin with. So please write down the points that you do not follow, and in tomorrow's session we'll clarify those doubts and we'll move forward. Okay, so any questions that I can take for today, guys? Anything that I can take for today?
No, Abhi, for now, no.
Okay. Okay, guys, and thank you so much and have a great day ahead. We'll meet tomorrow at the same time and we'll discuss more on this. Thank you, guys.